Today, we are talking about inflation in India. It's a number that affects every single one of us, right? But what if I told you that the way we've been measuring it has been, well, wrong for over a decade? We're going to break down why the government just had to hit the reset button on its most important economic metric. So let me ask you this. Have you ever looked at the official inflation rate and just thought, there is no way that's right? It's a feeling a lot of us have had. The official number looks kind of low, but your grocery bill, your rent, your kids' school fees, they're all telling a completely different story. Well, you're not imagining it, and we're about to find out why. You know, this feeling actually has a name. It's called the inflation disconnect. It's that nagging gap between the data we see on the news and the reality of what's leaving our bank accounts every day. I mean, just think about your own budget for a second. Rent? It only seems to go up, right? School fees feel like a constant pressure. Healthcare bills are always climbing. And then you've got all those daily things, groceries, transport, that just add up and up. These are the real costs that make it feel like our money just doesn't stretch as far as it used to. Okay, so to really get this disconnect, we need to understand how inflation is actually measured. The main tool they use is the Consumer Price Index, or CPI. Now, the key thing to know here is that the CPI isn't just a simple average of all prices. It's a weighted average. What that means is if we all spend more on housing than, say, movie tickets, a change in rent prices is going to have a much, much bigger impact on that final inflation number. And this, right here, is where the whole problem started. For years, India was trying to measure its 21st century economy with a yardstick that was basically from a different era. That's right, get this. For more than 10 years, our official inflation numbers were based on what an average household was buying all the way back in 2012. Just stop and think for a second. What was your life like in 2012? What were you spending your money on? The difference is pretty wild, isn't it? The old 2012 basket of goods literally, and I mean literally, included things like DVD players, cassettes, and VCRs. Today, our money goes to streaming services, cloud storage, and a whole lot of online shopping. We were measuring a completely different world. And this shift in what we prioritize is absolutely crucial. See, in the old CPI, food costs were given this huge weight, so they pretty much dominated the final inflation number. But today, while food is obviously still super important, a much bigger slice of our income goes to services, things like housing, healthcare, and education. The old system just wasn't keeping up with that reality. So what's the result of all this? You guessed it, an official inflation number that just felt understated. If food prices happen to be stable, the headline inflation could look really low, even while your rent and medical bills were quietly climbing in the background. It wasn't that inflation was being misreported, it just wasn't measuring the right things anymore.
Eventually, that mismatch just became too big to ignore. So finally, a modern measurement has arrived to replace that old, outdated framework.
This timeline really lays it all out. The starting point was 2012. For the next 12 years, our economy, our lives, everything transformed, but the measurement stayed frozen in time. Then, in February 2026, the switch was finally made, and India started using a completely new CPI series. The new base year is 2024, and this is a fundamental shift. It totally redefines what normal spending looks like, anchoring our inflation measurement to how we, as households, actually spend our money today. So what exactly makes this new framework so different? Let's pop the hood and take a look inside. It really boils down to 4 key upgrades. We've already talked about the new base year, but there's also a totally refreshed basket of goods and services, rebalanced weights to reflect what's actually important, and a major shift to a global classification standard. And this is where it gets really tangible. I mean, look at some of the new items they've added to the basket. Streaming services, rural housing costs, value-added dairy products, even services like babysitters. These are the real expenses that make up modern life. And the basket didn't just get an update, it got significantly bigger. The total number of items being tracked has jumped from 299 all the way up to 358. That gives us a much more complete and, frankly, more accurate picture of where our money is going. Now for what might be one of the most important upgrades, they've adopted a system called COECOP. I know, it sounds super technical, but the idea behind it is actually really simple. It's just a better, smarter way of organizing our spending. Instead of lumping a bunch of things together, it groups expenses by their purpose. Rent goes into housing, hospital bills go into healthcare, school fees go into education. You know, common sense. And this is a huge deal. The old system only used 6 broad categories, which meant important costs like healthcare and education were often just buried, and their impact got lost. The new system doubles that to 12 clear divisions. This finally gives these crucial service costs the visibility they deserve, so their price changes are properly counted. The update also reflects how we shop now. The new CPI isn't just relying on people visiting local markets anymore. It now combines that with data from online prices and digital tools, which finally acknowledges the huge shift we've all made to e-commerce and modern retail. Okay, so what does all of this actually mean? For our final section, let's see how these changes bring that official inflation number much closer to real life. So, what does this actually mean for the number you see in the news every month? Well, inflation might start to behave a little differently. Those sudden spikes in food prices might not swing the headline number as wildly as they used to. Instead, those slow, steady increases in things like rent, healthcare, and education will have a greater influence. The number might feel less jumpy, but a whole lot more familiar. And we can already see this new framework in action. The latest inflation readings, using this modern approach, show 2.73% in rural areas and 2.77% in urban ones. These numbers, reflecting the steady influence of services over those more volatile food prices, now form our new baseline for understanding the economy. Now, it is really important to remember, the goal isn't to create a number that perfectly matches your personal budget. That would be impossible. The whole idea is to create a national average that is far, far closer to the reality that most households are actually experiencing. And that brings us to a final, really crucial thought. Our expenses didn't suddenly change because of this new index. What has changed is our ability to finally see them clearly. As one source put it so well, quote, "Prices didn't suddenly change overnight, but the way we measure them finally has." This isn't a change in the economic landscape itself, but a long overdue change in the lens we're using to view it.